What does this video remind you of? Adrenaline, a sense of urgency, intensity, critical, life or death, and most of all, stressful. Now, I know for a fact that I will break down if I had to work in this type of environment. However, as healthcare professionals, there is a significant number of you, whether you are an ESL healthcare professional or otherwise, who are these incredible heroes of the system who are frontline workers. You guys do a job that is God's level, and I absolutely take my hat off to you. However, a very significant part of being able to work well with patients in such critical times is to be able to communicate in a way where you are time poor, when you're stressed, and someone's life, your patient's lives are at stake. So in this video, I'm going to cover how to embody empathetic, collaborative, and effective communication as an EMT or an emergency medical professional when you are treating and working with your patients. Back to my channel, everybody. Thank you very much for your ongoing presence, support, and engagement. My name is Shweta. I'm the founder of Healthy Dynamics. This channel and my coaching focuses on helping English as a second language healthcare professionals who speak English at an intermediate level. They are either working in an environment where their patients are native English speakers, or they are working in a country and living and working in a country where everyone is a native English speaker. And they, while they're quite relatively fluent in English, they want to take it to the next level and leverage that to improve their communication skills with their patients, and by doing so end up getting more referrals, testimonials in the positive direction, get more patients through the door, and build trust, influence, authority, and impact with their patients. So I have always been a very big fan of the show Paramedics, the show in Australia. I watch it quite regularly, and it really shows the day-to-day lives of frontline workers or emergency workers. And as it is, I love all healthcare shows, but this one particularly has been of interest to me. And also, I recently watched the Netflix series called Critical, which again shows what it's like in the UK side of the emergency medical services. And both shows are absolutely amazing. And I think working as an EMT means that your communication has to be absolutely spot on. You have to be like accurate. So it's not just like you eventually when you practice it, it becomes more of an art, but your communication skills have to be spot on. You have to be sort of do everything right. So really there's no room for error, because it could cost somebody their life. And this doesn't just apply to emergency medical staff members. So it's not just the video that I'm going to be talking about in this video. It's not just for emergency medical staff members. It also applies to anybody when you're finding yourself in a crisis situation with your patients. So even if, say, you are in a I remember back in the day when I was an inpatient at a mental health facility 2 times, there were a lot of times where there were people who there were crisis times when people had completely, not to be offensive, but lost their marbles, and they were being destructive, and they were self-harming, they were harming the property, they were harming, many different things. So even in that situation, when someone's safety or something's safety is at risk, you have to really brace yourself and get moving and resolve the situation as soon as possible. Now, let me just say this bluntly. In healthcare, silence or hesitation in an emergency situation can cost you a patient's life. And here's the controversial truth. Too many healthcare professionals from English as a second language background are so afraid of sounding wrong, being judged for their English, or offending someone, or even not saying it with the best accent, that they just choose silence. I know this because I used to do the same thing in my own life. I've mentioned this many times. I'd bite my tongue, stay polite, and let so many situations that were critical, not life and death, but critical and important, they spiraled, because I didn't want to stir the pot and I didn't want to sound controversial. But in healthcare, this habit isn't just unhelpful or not beneficial, it's downright dangerous. Now, when I say emergency, and I just want to go into the window of what it looks like. I'm not just talking about what you see in the shows that I've just described, or what you see in Hollywood movies with, alarms blaring and doctors screaming clear, or the paramedics screaming clear. Emergencies can happen every single day. I'll just give you an example of what happened in the mental health setting, but you can have other situations, such as a patient suddenly collapses. You can be a GP and you have like a bunch of patients in the waiting room, and they can have some sort of a seizure, and they can just collapse straight away. A child can have an allergic reaction in a clinic because they might be anaphylactic or something like that. A nurse notices that medication has been administered incorrectly, or something even smaller, such as a patient misunderstands your instructions about taking medication or following a treatment plan, do the wrong thing, and it costs them an arm and leg and much more. So in each of these situations, your words and your actions, it has to be clear, firm, immediate, and as a matter of urgency. And that's what will make the difference between safety and catastrophe. And also, of late, I have been connecting with a lot of emergency medical workers in healthcare via LinkedIn, and that's what inspired me to make this video. So, I know that communication in that space is of a sort, certainly much more different than the standard communication in healthcare protocols that I talk about. It's just like, it's on steroids basically. So I thought, let's just make a video about it. Now, here's the raw truth. ESL healthcare professionals often hesitate because of cultural conditioning. I've mentioned this many times before. You were raised to defer to authority. You were taught not to question seniors. You were taught to be polite and avoid confrontation and not lose your face. You were policed constantly into believing that speaking up your mind, saying what's on your mind is in a direct manner is rude. But the reality is, when it comes to someone's life and death in an emergency situation, your grammar, your accent, or your fear of sounding blunt, it does not matter. If you hesitate, the patient's life will pay the price. I'll get into what emergency communication is not. Emergency communication is not just rambling explanations full of jargon. That doesn't make sense because you have somebody's life that's at stake, and you cannot be, you can't be eloquent and elaborate in the language that you're using, because a person can stop breathing straight away if you do that. Polite indirect phrases like maybe we should or do you think we could? Absolutely not, because that shows indecisiveness on your part, but it has to be done, otherwise someone's life is going to be lost in the process. Waiting for permission to act. You're not going to get that. If you don't act, someone's going to die. Simple. Emergency communication, on the other hand, is short, clear, decisive instructions. So say, for example, if I remember watching that paramedics show so many times. Actually, let's not even talk about that. A few years ago, paramedics came to our house when my partner was experiencing symptoms of basically, shortness of breath, and he had to be rushed into the local ED. So we had a couple of paramedics who came to our place, and and they just told him, when they were taking his bloods, when they were taking his blood pressure, doing his vitals, they just gave very clear instructions. They didn't ask, please do this, don't do that, anything like that. They were very, very short, clear, and it was done to the point. And owning your voice, even if your accent isn't perfect, and using the power of tone and body language to cut through the chaos and still show empathy and compassion and care for your patients. Think about it. Which would you rather hear in a time of crisis? I think we may need to possibly check the airway or check the airway now, because one builds trust and the other builds confusion. And here's a very simple framework that I have put together in order for you to navigate as a healthcare professional through these scenarios where someone's in these crisis situations where a patient's life is at stake. So be observant. Have a look at what's happening right now that threatens a patient's safety and their well-being. And be very vigilant and notice their changing symptoms or their changing demeanor and things like that, and listen to them and take them seriously as well. If your English isn't perfect, make a judgment call, because you have to be decisive more than anything in a situation like this. So what you say, I think, even if it's imperfect, as long as the instructions are clearly understood, that is what's going to make the most difference. In saying that, speak clearly. Use simple words, strong tone, be direct, short, succinct, and snappy. So instead of call code blue, get epinephrine, so things like that. This is when you're obviously working with other emergency medical staff members. But when it comes to instructing your patients, instead of usually going round and round about that, or even using the word please, I would avoid that, because this is their patients' safety and their life is of utmost priority in a situation like this. Repeat the process repeat what you're saying if necessary, just for more clarification. You might also want to paraphrase it, different ways in which you can sort of manage and handle this. And definitely don't forget to debrief towards the end. So, towards the end, debrief with your colleagues, your patients, when they are much more stable, because all of these things like politeness, apology, cultural nuances, you have to save that after the crisis has been averted. And your responsibility is to your patients' well-being first and foremost, especially in a situation like this when life and death is at stake. So here's the polarizing truth. If you're still afraid of sounding impolite, if you're still more worried about your English more than your patient's life, then your patients are going to suffer and lose their life as a process. And that's not why you became a healthcare professional in the first place. Emergency situations in particular demand clarity, courage, and presence, and obviously being efficient and being calm and being regulated and things like that. So perfect English, grammatically being correct and using the correct tense, that's really not going to save the patient's life in a situation like that. You need authority in your voice and conviction in your tone and zero hesitation in how and what you deliver. So your patients will remember what you did to save them in a critical situation like this. They're going to forget about your accent and your grammar and everything like that. And that is the legacy that you should be aiming for. So let me know your thoughts. Have you ever been in an emergency situation at a clinic or in a hospital where even if you're not an EMT, you have witnessed that or experienced that firsthand? Please share your thoughts and your experiences in the comment section below. To follow videos about communication in the ESL healthcare space, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Leave this video a like and your comments and feedback in the comment section below. Don't forget also to attempt my communication persona quiz to find out what your default communication persona is and how you can leverage that as a healthcare professional to give better outcomes to your patient, and also the option to book a consultation call to see how I can support you in becoming a better communicator. All the links are in the description box below. As always, thank you very much for your time, attention, and presence. I shall see you next week.